So, man's possible evolution. What is it that we can become? We can't become our full potential, I would argue. A lot of people are talking about, live to your full potential, and I just want to experience my full potential. To me, that's not a possibility, but there is a possibility that we can experience more and better. And if you've been down and out, broke, sick, uh, not in a good place mentally, then you know that you can be in a better place than that. And so, from wherever we are now, there is better than whatever we have now because we've experienced something much lower than what we're experiencing today. So, how do we open up more of that experience? That is the topic for the conversation today. We've got three or four key sort of resources to introduce and discuss that are part of the Uncom Vault that I would encourage men to dive into over the weeks, months, years ahead. But yeah, it's an open discussion of how do we get to a better place. I'd love to hear from you guys on what's made the most difference through your journeys so far, and share experiences and resources, things that have mattered to you. Just before we kicked off, we were discussing how having an output for your creativity, something to get feedback through, a feedback loop, is one of the most valuable, important things that you can have when you decide to go on a path of self-development for its own sake. Without a feedback loop, without students, without athletic output, it kind of becomes a form of mental masturbation. And it's kind of almost a rabbit hole or something that you can get stuck in that doesn't actually do anything in my experience. Like when you build a business, or when you decide to build your body to another level, then you experience a lot more of your own challenges and own weaknesses. And so, having those outputs of, okay, well, how's your business going? Okay, well, how's your body going? That tells us. You don't have to say what your mind is like. You don't have to tell us if you're disciplined or what your values are. Like, you can see it with those things, with the body, with the bank account, and that tells us where the education's been in the past. Opening up for you guys, like opening thoughts here before we dive into some of the resources to discuss. What's coming up for you?
For me, what's been the biggest thing has been the mind. Like everything is thought, and a big blockage for me have been how I think and how I speak and what's the narrative. And it's always been for me like I get an input and I just react to it, and that's the subconscious living. And what I've inserted is the observation, the reflection part. It's like, okay, this is happening. Oh shit. Okay, I don't have to get mad about it or speak like an asshole to myself. I can actually become my friend and learn from it. So inputting that 10-second, 5-second frame in between the reaction has given me a superpower that I didn't know I could have. And that's changing my emotional reaction to things, and that gives me back more control. So that's been a huge one for me. And then of course the information, like where I point my eyes, my ears, who I surround myself with, are powerful pillars to change and elevate consciousness or bring different results.
Great place to start. I'm sure that's bringing things up for Tyson, Charles, Ndabongo. What's coming up for you hearing that? It's a concept that's been said throughout the ages in different words.
For me, I second that. Just like the observation over the past year, my journey is, as I suppose, like that, being able to observe and sit back and actually watch everything, in a sense, watch like your own little life play out. And then when you can sit back and watch that, you can start to see where all these little things come from as well. So I think I'm body echo here. But yeah, that's been huge for me as well, just the watching of everything. And then I suppose for me right now, it's like I've done the journey and I've started sitting back and watching it, but now it's like being able to see where everything comes from, or see all the stories and all the reasons your life is the way it is. But now it's like you still have to do the work after being able to see and stepping into that next stage. And yeah, stepping into that is through this and stuff as well.
That connection though is so important what you both pointed out of the first step is to observe, is to realize what's really going on, not just from the outside world, because that's perception, right? But to realize what's happening in here, the self-perception. But those are just the building blocks. If you stop at the observation level, you'll never get anywhere, and you'll constantly realize that you're not enough. You'll constantly realize, oh, I should be doing better. Oh, I wish I was doing X or Y. I wish I was achieving. But the real work after that step of being able to observe is actually it's in the practice. And so you need to observe in order to know where the practice should go. But it's the actions that we have to take within ourselves, whether it's the 10 seconds and the language we use to speak to ourselves, or it's interaction with someone else, a therapist, a friend, our relationships. Again, even if it's internally, those actions and those steps to actually do something to change how we react. That's where the work in my mind starts.
So
I agree.
You go, Tyson. There.
No, you go, mate. You go.
There you go.
Yeah, I agree that, like my journey has been huge. Just from whether you want to go all the way back to my attempted suicide, it's just like, and I look back at that and I just all the chain reactions that have gone on from that. It's been a massive journey, but when you look back at it, like Charles said there before, it's like these little bits and pieces. While you're in it at the time, you look at it now and you go, that's what's actually occurred for me to do this. And like we're discussing, or you guys was discussing prior to the call starting, it was like, this has been this amazing self-development tool, this Uncom platform. And then, like Bongo was just saying, then being able to actually like notice and be aware of how things are playing out for you, and then actually taking it out of the thinking mind and actually putting systems and processes in place to actually then work out how are you going to do X, Y, or Z, or how are you then going to relate with different people to actually then even go to those people and be a sounding post. Like the connect calls and stuff are great, because then it takes people out of that thinking mind and you're actually able to voice certain things with certain people and then get that feedback. And sometimes it's a great thing, because a lot of the time, and especially even at the moment, I feel like with the way the world is, it can be an echo chamber. So it's nice to be able to take your echo chamber out of your head and have people available and have that experience. And then obviously, like meditation is amazing. That allows you then to have that clarity of thought to then create those responsive interactions with the world rather than a reactive interaction to the world. So yeah, I agree with what everyone's saying at the moment.
Yeah, so some of the space that we're diving mostly into at the moment is like attention and awareness, right? The primary objective, it seems, if you were observing from a distance what's going on with mankind, it would seem that there's been a dramatic transition of attention from being in your local environment to being on a digital platform that is curated to have a certain outcome, right? If you look at just the last 50 years, if you watched it, our perception of time comes through our brains. But if you're watching in fast forward from a distance over the last 50 years, if you watched it in 5 minutes, you would see like, oh shit, everything changed. Like they went from hanging out with their families and going to see local community and, doing things in that environment to they're using these devices all the time. And then, okay, well, who's running the devices? Like who's setting the agenda on what people are looking at? To me, the technology itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like I like the work of Buckminster Fuller. His vision was that by this time, there would be a less need for a workforce. There would be a possibility to work 10 or 20-hour working weeks, but that man would be working on solving problems and contributing to like a collective database of knowledge. Like that's what we would dedicate ourselves to, because that's what seemed logical from his position of like, well, if we didn't have to spend so much time chopping wood and carrying water, what would we do? And it seems logical that we would, feed intelligence into a mastermind, but instead we're feeding attention into this thing that is not a mastermind, that is not guiding mankind towards something interesting. So this battle is, okay, how do we regain our attention, and how do we put attention on something that we value? Like, obviously we value TikTok if we're putting a lot of time and attention into it, or Instagram, or all these, meme videos, because that shows your values. Your bank account shows your values. Where your attention's being shows your values. But if someone was to decide, okay, I don't want to be putting all my attention into this anymore, like I can feel it's not making me a better man, it's not getting me to where I want to be, how do you win that attention back? How do you fight this battle for your own mind, which I think is the key challenge that's going on at the moment, is like, is artificial intelligence going to rule our minds by putting us into these interfaces and staying there and being willing to accept whatever is being fed to us from artificial intelligence? Or are we going to continue to engage with divine intelligence, which is the inner knowing of, I need to be doing something different to this, I need to be doing something better than this, that I think drives men towards uncommon success, and it drives us to live the kind of lives that we're living. How do we operate in that area? How do we make the change? Maybe like you could speak practically for yourself, especially if anyone has felt like they were addicted to those platforms in a negative way. Not that they're sending a bunch of DMs to get people into a program that gets them off those platforms, but that you're actually using the platform in the way the makers have intended it to use to shape the collective consciousness.
I think something that happens quite a lot is there's obviously content on Instagram, YouTube, these platforms that you can perceive as being educational, as useful, as helping you on your journey, but it removes you from having to take the action of practicing that. So I can get sucked in and just being like, wow, I'm learning so much, I'm being so productive, because I'm just scrolling through and looking at content that maybe is related to the things that I want to be doing, but it's removing me away from actually taking the actions and practicing doing it. And I feel like that's one of the things that sort of catches me or has caught me the most off guard in the past, where it's not so much where I'm just like watching whatever, but I'm watching things that are interesting in regards to the things that I want to be doing, but it removes me away from actually doing it.
I can relate to that so much. In the past, I've also been very addicted to YouTube, using it intentionally, but like doing mental masturbation by living others' lives and getting this satisfaction from imagining that I'm living that person's lives through a screen. And what eventually changed totally my behavior to that is the purpose, is having like a hero, a leader, someone I aspire to become, and imagining that person and slowly bringing that picture closer to me by getting into the masculine, the more energetic side, and actually want to have the experience of getting that and learning through that. Where before I was fooled into thinking that, okay, I'm just watching this guy and I'm learning everything I need to know, but everything comes from experience. Like that's the way of getting your hands dirty in this game and learning, failing. And I think that's what we're supposed to do to grow, like everything in nature, like everything around us, to reframe failure as something good. And like Paul have said it, and I loved it, is the comfort zone, like their condition. If you have set it to 24 degrees and the room is going to over 24 or under, that's what's going to happen. It's either going to pump out more air to keep it there, or it's going to stop pumping out air to keep it there. And it's the same. If you want to be more, your identity has to change in order to become more. Otherwise, all the actions, your narrative, everything you're going to do is going to be pulling you back to who you are if you're not thinking differently about who you are. And to become different and think different, you have to consume different stuff and act differently. But that's the hard part. That's why the environment is huge, and having these conversations that like right now, it's beautiful. That's what I've been missing, honestly. Yeah.
and even better in the even better in the villages. You know, that's the vision is, yeah, we have this digital interface for now, and it can be very valuable. And you know, I had good years during COVID when I didn't see many people, but the possibility of like, what if we build custom locations around this, and exactly what it looks like for families and for how many people and for what we're going to eat for breakfast, I don't know. But the concept is clear. Like the concept of, well, we can do better than this, and so we should create something. Like just the fact of Nico deciding not to use that place as an Airbnb and put it on booking.com and just make some money from it. You know, when I was over there, the decision was made, okay, let's see if we can put this place at the service of humanity and see what it does. There hasn't been an event there yet. It's already changed thousands of men's lives, literally. It's changed their perspective on what's possible. It's changed the vision of the future without even actually doing it. So the digital world gives us that possibility to solve things and to open doors in minds much faster than when we can actually get together face to face. Like that opens more possibilities again. The Uspensky's work, Man's Possible Evolution, is the first book that Paul was the only book that Paul encouraged us to read, I believe, of his. It's about 2.5 hours on YouTube to listen to that book spoken by an AI. It's quite complicated stuff. There's a bunch of different topics and things within it. I quizzed ChatGPT about Uspensky's work yesterday and what like a training program from Uspensky might look like and all these kinds of things. And it's actually pretty good at giving you a summary of how to make sense of something that was written 100 years ago in a different language, in a different culture and different time into today's time. He worked with Gurdjieff, and he lived all over the place. He lived in England and Russia and Georgia and the United States. Uspensky himself, Gurdjieff also traveled around quite a lot, and they were looking for a system and a practical solution of how to manage attention and live a better life. Gurdjieff's credited with having a more practical system, and Uspensky is more theoretical. But it is about this thing. Like one of the primary themes is this thing of attention and the idea of a fourth way. So that's one of the key concepts of Uspensky, is that the way of the monk, the way of the yogi, the way of the fakir to higher mental function and capacity, which is these endeavors that have gone on within small groups of men throughout the ages. Is there another way? You know, that's kind of the question that they were answering. And their answer was that you can actually develop yourself mentally in a way that is extremely uncommon without secluding yourself from society, without sectioning yourself off in the way that those other three groups did. And the fourth way was constant attention and awareness of what you're doing, why your body is in the position that it's in, what your emotional state is what negative thoughts are passing through your mind, and to have constant self-awareness at the same time as interacting with your external environment. In a nutshell, that is the big concept that I gained from that work. There's also a movie, and there's other books and things that I went into. I like going down rabbit holes, but what I found most useful was that Man's Possible Evolution, and then some of the summary stuff that you can find on YouTube about his work as well. And yeah, I'm not sure if you've had, who's had the opportunity to look at that or what's coming up, for you guys sort of listening to that idea. I think that's why Paul says he doesn't meditate, because the idea is that he's challenging himself all day to come back to his awareness of self. And yeah, maybe that's what matters most, is to guide the attention all day rather than control the attention in a controlled environment for a set part of the day. It's concepts of tools to get to the same outcome. Charles?
I'll jump on from there. The last year I sort of dove in a little bit of just trying to hold that awareness constantly. And I sort of did retreat from everything a little bit. So I went back into went doing some solo adventures and solo trips and stuff like that. Retreated and got to a space where I could hold that awareness and had significant experiences in that time. But then what I'm finding now is when I'm engaging back into this sort of stuff and everything, it's the process of keeping that attention the whole way through. And then that's like when you speak about the social medias and things like that too, when you're coming back into it, it's the process now is of trying to hold that throughout like the whole thing. But I do think that like potentially like a meditation or something like that can, or it does for me, it's like how I can draw back into that space or meet that space again and then come back into the world sort of the yin and yang. But in the Spence's work and stuff like that too, they speak about transmutation, which is, I suppose, at the live events when you have people who are living that, like yourself, Keegan, and people throughout this group, you like just through the observation or just through being there, it's like that transmutation of energy sort of thing as well, which is interesting. But yeah, I suppose with the uncom, it's that helps you keep the attention fully with the app and things like that. Just doing that constantly.
You're encouraged to reset regularly to what you actually value. If you were choosing your path in life, what would you choose to do this month? What would you choose to do today? If we continue to ask ourselves that, we're ahead of a lot of you're likely to do more things that you're proud of. Ultimately, it seems as though it's self-rewarding. It seems to me that it's like the path is self-guided in the fact that when you're living poorly, you feel shit. Like when you don't have purpose and you're not eating well and you're interacting negatively with others, like it feels terrible. So it's like not that heaven is some place that you aspire to get to when you die, but it's like you feel closer to it when you're doing the things that you're meant to be doing, and you feel further from it when you're doing the things that are taking you further away from your best. Like that, it seems as though we all have this really powerful internal compass, and it seems like that compass gets turned off when we're on these platforms. And it's like, oh, 5 minutes just went past, and it's like, yeah, there was some interesting stuff there. I only follow stuff that's really interesting. I put not interested every time something else pops up on the, whatever that screen's called that has all the random stuff on it that grabs your attention. But still, I know that I'm not really there. That's the thing. Like, I'm not really there when I'm immersed in that. And that is like, wow, like how does technology do that where I'm not there anymore, versus consistently resetting and setting up each day of like, oh, that felt good. I'm really glad that I did that. I'm proud of that. The feeling that you get after a training session, the feeling you get after you do a great coaching session with someone, often after these kind of calls or after live events, like, yeah, that was valuable. That's going to stick with me. There's something to that. You don't get that feeling when you're on social media. Like, you don't feel, oh, like I'm proud of what I just did. I just watched a bunch of people do a bunch of cool stuff. Maybe I got some ideas, but then you have to go and put that into your own life. If you get an idea, you see someone doing something cool and you're like, I wonder if I can do that. And then you go do it. Then the reward comes after doing the thing that you did. Right? It doesn't come from actually watching the thing. So how do we hold that and continue to come back to what it is that we want all throughout the day and have more of our activities focused on what we want? Like, we've got it on the month to month level. We've got it on the kind of, did I get my training done today? Did I do something that moves the business forward? But like the ultimate is like the moment to moment instantaneous attention, those attention units that we can't get back. Any attention unit, it's gone. Anything we've put attention on the past, we can't impact that now. So that seems like the highest level that we can aspire to, is like to put our attention, volume and intensity on the things that we value. That's why the one-to-one calls are so valuable as well, because it's like, it's just you and the other guy, and like there's going to be attention there, and it's on you to listen. It's on you to formulate ideas. Much better than just watching YouTube, as you're saying there, Jonathan.
There's a tricky aspect of this where one of the things you mentioned, Keegan, is that the real reward comes when you actually practice that which you aspire to do, right? So you see something on social media, well, that guy's doing a handstand, let me go try doing a handstand. And so then you get this reward of accomplishing something. And within the brain, we're actually getting rewarded by just watching other people. And that's where the interesting factor comes from. You're getting these hits of dopamine. You're getting this activation of a desire, right, of your brain's spinning because you get to see this happening, and learning to notice that, where you can actually get, this is why social media is addictive. You can get addicted to the simple observation of other people doing cool things. There's an app called 1sec, as in 1 second, that allows you to kind of filter yourself, and you can throw it onto, like, blocks a screen basically. Every time you open social media, it'll throw up a screen, say, take a deep breath. Do you actually want to open this app? So I've put it on Instagram, and it'll tell you how many times you've tried to open the app just subconsciously. So I suggest that. Put it on your social media. See how many times you open it without thinking, am I actually coming to engage with content that is going to change my life in a positive direction? Or am I just reflecting and going back into the matrix of, oh, let me just take my mind off of real life?
That's a cool app. But yeah, those 1 second things, I have the idea of, like, okay, I need to go onto Instagram because I need to check this on this channel. Like, for example, we've got a new guy starting doing some outreach for us. He's on the Uncom Villagers channel. So I'm like, okay, I need to check what he did on the inbox yesterday, give him some feedback on his messages. But then when you get in there, that first thing you see is usually something really cool, right? And then you're like, oh yeah, I'll just read this one thing. And then I close the app down 3 minutes later thinking, like, okay, that's enough of that. And I'm like, oh, I was going to message Christian, right? Like it's a box that distracts our attention, like, so powerfully, that we should learn from it. And there's magic in it. But yeah, the power of that kind of concept of, like, buy yourself 1 second. If the technology can help to buy that 1 second, it's like going to the fridge when you're fasting, right? Like, unconsciously you just kind of go there. It's the same thing that happens with these apps. But if you can turn the app into, this is a place I go to look for people who want to go on this journey that I want to go on with other men, then it does have a different function. Like, if I wasn't using it for business, I wouldn't be using it. I encourage everyone to delete their social media until such a point as, like, I've done work on myself that I'm actually wanting to add value to other people's lives. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to have a product, but you probably should have a product. And if you stopped using Instagram until you actually had a product, and Facebook, TikTok, and all these platforms, that would probably be a good thing. But yeah, the way that we're working on things within Uncommon Success is that you actually you need to publish, you need to share your ideas. And the fact having these conversations is a cool thing. The thing, there's other men that actually want to have this conversation. Like, I'm fascinated by these topics, but just reading books about it has limited returns. Like, where you can actually have a conversation that's and turn it into a business, turn it into what you actually do. Like, that's the best thing that I can imagine. I want to introduce these other couple of concepts, the levels of human development, the spiral dynamic from Claire Graves. There's a lot to that, and there's all sorts of places we can go with that discussion. But to me, the core concept is that there are different levels of human development, and we all have the opportunity to develop ourselves to a greater extent, but it's going to be determined by our environment. So setting up an environment that requires you to be more developed is the only way to experience higher levels of yourself, according to this model. And it makes sense to me because it's my experience as well. I've just been there in Vanuatu. There's abundant food year round. You don't have to plan. Your family's not going to die if you don't plan and organize. In cold climates, Jonathan's got Danish heritage. If you're in Denmark and you don't plan for the winter, you don't see another winter. So culturally, there's been a requirement for different cultures and different people living in different places. That's led to different levels of development. Like, it's not good or bad. It's different environments. You can be a great person and be operating in, primarily in purple or red, or it's not negatives and positives within this spiral dynamic system. But to become enterprising and to be able to operate on multiple levels, you have to create an environment that requires you to do that. And so that is what we have with Uncommon Success. It's like, you're encouraged to be in the marketplace, and that feels really uncomfortable for people initially. Like, well, what do you have to offer? What is the price of that? that's orange. Do you actually have business? Can you do business with others? The yellow is more doing business for good, where it's about mutual benefit and benefiting the whole. The company, the structure of Uncommon Success is requiring us to become more of this yellow, which is like less than 1% of mankind. And it doesn't feel comfortable to me, and I don't think it feels comfortable to anyone, of like, how do we actually make this work where it helps me, it helps other people, it's good for it's good for the group, it's good for the collective, but it's also good for me. Within that, you have to have the ability to be the strength of red, and the strength, the idea is that every level that you go through, it should be almost like the journey from childhood to manhood. But the way the system is set up is more that we have this prolonged childhood, right? Like, I noticed it really in Europe as well. This is why travel is so important. In Europe, like, it's common for a guy to start university at like 20, 21, and they're just finishing their bachelor's degree at 25, where Australia, you usually finish your undergrad at like 21. And so there's guys that are 30 that are just finishing their masters, and it's like, bro, like, you just missed a decade, and they think it's free education, but it's like, it's not free. You just lost 10 years of attention, maybe 15. Ben Patrick's designing the school system that allows you to finish at 15. Imagine if you just got to work at 15. Even if you're flipping burgers, if you've got a good mentality around money and you've got a good way of doing things, you could be washing cars, washing windows at 16, 17, 18. By the time you're 20, you got money for a house. You've got possibilities. You've got a bunch of experiences. And so we have to create this environment. If we keep people in the environment of everything being familiar, of 9 to 5, of not requiring new knowledge to be able to survive, then we're going to keep getting what we got. If we make people move around the world, if we make them learn different languages, if we encourage them to meet people from all different cultures and countries with different businesses, and that's the idea, is to create a group that isn't everyone the same, using all the same systems. The idea is that we all have different things, and so we're challenged by itself of like the different backgrounds that we've lived in. Casper's there in Montenegro at the moment. It's very, very different to Denmark. It's been brutal for him. It's been just him and Lubo living there and working away. And it's been brutal. And I'm so happy for him that he's suffering, because it's like, that's what needs to happen. And I did it to myself. I had to do it to myself when I was 22, 23. I went to Latin America. I hitchhiked. I slept on floors. It was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable waiting on the side of the road, seeing if a truck driver was going to pick me up, and then guessing that he wasn't going to kill me or, poison me or who knows what. But by going through that rite of passage and those experiences, that made me a better coach when I went back to coach the professional rugby players. Like, I had a completely different experience compared to most strength and conditioning coaches who'd been through university and then they work with players. And I didn't understand the other coaches, like the way they spoke to players and the way they thought about things, but it was because I'd had those other experiences. And so we have to set this up for ourselves, for each other. If we're gonna develop and experience those other levels of possibilities. What's coming up for you here, thinking about the spiral and those levels of human development, Tyson?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, when you think about it, like Joseph Campbell and stuff talks about with the hero's journey, and how we go on these journeys to either find ourselves and then find what we're about, and then return with the goods and return with the information that we've become accustomed to or learned along the way. And that's what I kind of like in my journey, and what I'm hearing from you there. Like, it's you spend that time as a form of kind of initiation. That's one thing I feel like maybe that modern society, Western society, lacks a little bit, is that initiation phase through into manhood. And I feel like something, even in Uncom, we're getting some sort of initiation into like wealth creation, like how to actually operate optimally. And I think that's like a really big thing for men in general. Like we miss out on that stuff now, and it's just I think that's another thing of self development is having that initiation phase that we do tend to miss out on.
That initiation phase here in Australia for most is given a six-pack at 14 and going to get on the piss sort of thing. So it's like changing the paradigm of all that. I think with the spiral dynamics too, like you can get comfortable in your job and comfortable just in doing these things which keeps you in the positions that you're in, and then creating that change. That's why the in-person events I think work so well, is because it's like that immediate sort of your paradigms are blown as well sort of thing. So Uncom's doing good for creating that. I think it's going to work well. I just actually did my second spiral dynamics before I jumped on here then, so it's going to be interesting.
And just piggybacking on that again, with the spiral dynamics, it's like noticing like where you are on that scale, and where holes and stuff kind of exist, and then seeking out those where the holes maybe that you need to actually plug or work on, is great for that development, because then that way you might be all up the top in turquoise, like spiritual, disappeared into the ether. But when you really need to come back and root down into that tribal phase, and then it's kind of like actually really anchor into it. So, yeah, I like the spiral dynamics and how you can then get a better idea on where you sit and seek out those people that you can potentially look to get more information from and growth potential from learning from different people.
Going again there. I think like in the spiral dynamics as well, it says about how you change when you're sort of like ready to change, when your current environment, your current reality isn't meeting the needs of your potential as well. So I think anyone or everyone that's coming into Uncom is looking for that change, or looking for that thing as well. So they're here because they're ready, and then creating that environment the way that it's set out right now, having the in-person events when they're going, will just help cultivate that change heaps more as well.
Yeah, we're all experiencing this differently because we have different projects, different goals. For me, the thing of building a team and having like a bigger team, it's a bigger project with having the villages, having the app. It's a lot more challenging than anything I've ever done before, because there are so many people involved and each person has their own journey and their own goals and desires. And you know, when I decide to learn a handstand, it's all on me. And if I don't do it, okay. If I do it, okay. But I get to choose. Where when it comes to building the app, there's a lot of stuff I can't do. When it comes to building the network and community now, if we're going to have 1,000 engaged players, like it takes a different level of thinking and concepts that I haven't done well in before. And you can't just get there through individual hard work and focus. Like getting the first business that I had, it was, you know, mentoring men. I think the most we ever had was 70, right? But generally there was probably, 30 engaged guys in the process, and they would come to live events, and it was pretty easy to deliver that. But now this game that I've set up for myself, it's literally requiring like all kinds of things of me that I don't really have, to be honest, and I haven't had, but I'm getting them. Like it is changing me. And it's like, if you feel like you're the finished product in whatever you're doing, then it's time to move on. Like when we won the premiership in 2013, like that was my third year of working in rugby as the sort of heading the program. I'm like, okay, well, I'm done. We won it. We won it all. Like we weren't meant to win. how much am I going to learn from doing this again? Like, of course I would learn, but I would learn like 0.1%. And it's the same, like when I snatched 100 kilos, it was like, okay, well, I can keep doing snatch every day and I can get to 110. But the thing that I thought was crazy that I could never do was the 100 kilos. And I did it. So what else can I do that I thought I couldn't do? And to me, that's the way that we set this thing up, is like all the crazy shit you thought you couldn't do, like go do that and then see how you feel. That's pretty much the model of uncommon success in a nutshell. And it works. I don't have people coming back to me saying, I really regret learning to 5-ball juggle. Or I really regret that I can now do a 90-second handstand. Or I really regret that I now know how to make money online, or I know how to speak to people from all over the world, or I know how to speak a different language. Or I never have someone coming back to me saying they regret the skills that they developed. And sometimes they end up not being in love with the organization that I have or the culture within that organization. Like guys feel like, okay, I'm done with Real Movement now. Like I'm doing my own thing. That's cool. But no one ever regrets developing the skills that, we're encouraged to cultivate. So what is it for you now? Like that's stretching you, that's going to stretch you, that sort of makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable and you know you're not quite there yet. I'd love to sort of hear a bit of that personal journey from where you're at the moment. You can relate it back to attention, or you can relate it back to, components of the spiral if you're aware of how that works. But Maximus,
can you hear me?
You can now, yeah.
Yeah, so a big day yesterday. I joined Scientology out here in Clearwater. So that was no, I'm just kidding. But I actually stopped in the Scientology church, and I was just asking questions because I have curiosity about it. And they were talking about a similar concept to like the power versus force concept, which I think the power versus force emotional chart has had like one of the biggest impacts on me without even having read the book. Just the understanding that your emotions can be mapped, and we're all energetic beings who are vibrating at a certain level. And when even within this a year alone, I've went from a very low vibrational state to a much higher one, simply by, I guess, having the willingness to look into my own psychology and apply a lot of the concepts that Keegan and Paul and other people have put into my perspective. But yeah, and even in the Scientology, the woman was explaining to me how they have this like logarithmic map of emotions, and how, you could be stuck in anger and you're going to live there. And it's, you're kind of like the Joe Dispenza topic, how you're basically reliving your 5-year-old event that happened to you that made you angry. And now you just have become this angry person out of this repetitive cycle. And then they explained how, you get to a level of, there's some people who don't give a shit either way. The worst thing in the world's happening and they're like, whatever. The best thing happens, they're like, whatever. So they're kind of like neutral, which is more powerful than being shameful and guilty. But it's also like, there's so much more. And then, yeah, as you keep developing, you keep vibrating higher, and you reach states of love and gratitude. And the more you can come back to that, like, I've just been, that has been my intention, like, as of late, is just to, how can I incorporate more positive emotions into my life without overdoing it. Like, there was the last thing I'll say is I was reading To Sell is Human by Daniel Pinkman, and he said there was a study that talked about emotions and how if you're overly positive, it can actually be detrimental. Like they did a study, and the ideal ratio was like, it was like basically 3 to 1, like 3 positive emotions to 1 negative emotion, where you're taking the negative emotion as the feedback, and otherwise you're just like vibrating at a much higher level as your baseline. You're feeling grateful for life, and you're loving people, and you're not taking yourself so seriously. Were you guys able to hear that? Or yeah, okay. Shit. There you go. All right.
Done
That's
for
all
now.
from me, though.
Yeah, the levels of consciousness, the Hawkins stuff is another frame, another powerful lens to look at things through. It's like I think there's two sides with that. Like to me, it seems as though there are people who get so wrapped up in like, okay, what's the consciousness of this thing? But then there has to still be a doing. There has to be like, okay, what are the results? What are the outcomes? It's all well and good to sit in a high vibration all day. Maybe it works. Maybe I just don't understand the way the universe works. But it seems as though sitting in a high vibration all day and like being overly obsessed with the calibration is maybe a barrier to actually making things, making real things, doing things, building things. To me, we need to build solutions, and it matters who we are when we build the solution because we build from the place that we're coming from. But yeah, in building the solutions, we learn so much. Like we learn so much about ourselves, and it's it's a valuable tool, and it definitely has a big impact on me and on the network. But yeah, the thing of who we, what are we actually working towards? What are we creating? The selves is an interesting one that sort of confuses me to also looking at the consciousness is like the parts is the other way to look at it, is that we have all of these different things within us. We have the ability to be super aggressive and kill, and we need to have that ability, because if we didn't, then we would be killed or we would not be able to hunt. And we also have the ability to be lovers and romantic, and we have the ability to be playful children. And the transition between those different ways that we can be is one of the other sort of key concepts that we've studied and that exists there within the psychology element of uncommon success. There's certain parts of ourselves or certain ways of being that tend to be more natural and we feel comfortable about, we feel proud about. And then there's these other ways of being, options that we have that sometimes are more difficult to access or that we don't want to access. For example, like that violent, aggressive side to ourselves, like it's one that probably our ancestors were much more comfortable with. Like I killed a goat and a pig, on my own farm with my hands and a knife because I wanted to have that experience that my ancestors had had. It was a huge emotional experience. And I was like, every one of my ancestors, up until my father, who said maybe he killed a chicken once, but everyone before that had been through that experience of like, okay, we need to eat. This thing is going to be the food. This needs to be done and get it done. And there's other tribes and people that you can see doing this that like are able to do it with no emotion, that it's like it doesn't affect them at all. Where for me, it was like one of the biggest experiences of my life was taking the life of the pig and of the goat. So this knowledge that, okay, yeah, I'm not one person. I am all of these different parts or selves, depending on the environment. That then also comes back to the awareness of, okay, who's on the stage at this time? Is this the person who's meant to be on the stage? Am I meant to be the lover? If I turn up on this call as the lover, how does that go versus turning up here as leader or as an intellect, right? And that's like the other one of the other key components of this psychology system, that if someone's looking back at it, or if guys who are thinking about how does my mind work, how do I wire myself for better results, like this is one of the things as well. Where are you at with this for yourself at the moment? Like which is developing, what's coming out, which self or parts are you feeling more proud of, and what are you struggling with more?
I found with the cycle of selves stuff, it was like I did the process of that a lot, and without developing that sort of space of awareness, or that self-realization of like true you, the like holding the awareness throughout it all, it was hard to adjust, like to develop other selves from maybe the one that's maybe a bit more insecure or has these fears about other things like that. So I find that the self-realization or holding that space of awareness when using the self stuff is like super important. But then being able to choose what comes next. So then you basically, in this call, you're showing up as you utilizing that self, and then, but still seated in that awareness, if that makes sense. I found that was the most important thing for the selves. And then with the, I reckon even asking some of these questions, having this sort of work alongside all of the stuff you're saying about the handstands and the juggling, is people that are overcoming the things they didn't think they could do for a start, but then also having this sort of language and these sort of things helps them understand what they're doing at the same time. I think that could be beneficial in regard to moving towards that self-realization as well.
Yeah, it's all patterns. Jonathan?
Yeah, I've just like been listening, and this concept of words or spells are coming to my mind all the time. Like first time we spoke, Keegan, you mentioned in like I don't know, in 1 minute, it kind of just gave me the idea of what would happen, Jonathan, if you took all the investment of energy you put into your body and put it into your business or into your vision, and something just says, and you know it changed, and it was just the idea of that taking a part of me and putting it into a different scenario. And that's by being good at asking these questions, you're just kind of rewiring and taking things that you're already doing, but into a different environment that you're acting. And that will bring a totally different outcome in your life. So either having people around you that ask you the question to point your awareness light into a different part of the room will suddenly brings just make different calculations of your behaviors, and that's something that changed my life and how I operate myself, and also how I help my students or people around me to bring a better version, because many times we can't see ourselves what we're actually good at. But if we have people that believe in us and can see that, hey, Jonathan, you're actually good at explaining whatever, or you're good at doing a handstand, so that means you're consistent. And I don't believe that I'm consistent because I can't see it myself. But if I get asked to take a part of myself, or and put it into a different environment, that will bring a different results. Just saying the same thing, and that brings me the idea of, I think it was Ido Portala, I don't remember, but there's doing the training, but there's also learning to be a student, and kind of taking that first step of learning to learn and being a student in a game. That comes to mind, that learning to juggle, learning to handstand, which is some of the pillars of uncommon success, is learning to learn and taking that journey of being a practitioner and a student. I think that's what I wanted to share.
There's always going to be so much more to learn. But yeah, the physical fruits can be good to look back on and say, we must have been doing something, because I can do all this stuff now, or I know all these people now, or I speak these languages now. It's good to have the physical proof, I think, is an important thing in personal development, to actually have the receipts, have the metrics that go with what it is that you value. We all have them. It just depends what it is. Like how many bottles of beer you've drunk, or how many, whatever's you've done. Like we set those values for ourselves. I think it's an important conversation. It's cool to the practice itself of like organizing your words and your thoughts and contributing into the conversation. It's kind of a new format that we've been going with. This is the second call like this, but I would encourage those who listen and check it out that feel like they would be super uncomfortable being on here to do that as well. Maybe it's a new format we can go with for connect calls, that we can, have more people setting up. Hey, there's going to be a discussion on this. You want to get in? If you were to go on Joe Rogan 5 years from now, it would probably be a good thing to be doing one of these each week and coming with ideas and things that you want to say, and practicing the ability to express it as well. That's the cool thing about how we work together is it works on so many different levels. Like there's the level of what are we doing psychologically? There's the level of this practice is good practice for business if you want to run presentations. There's the level of your public speaking and those sorts of things. There's also the networking element of like, okay, you guys know each other a little bit more now, and therefore you're more likely to jump on each other's podcast or offer a place to stay if you happen to be in town, or all of those kinds of things as well. So the wins across all levels is what I love with the culture and the network that we're building here. I appreciate that you guys wanted to have this discussion, and it's kind of a serious one. I guess it's difficult to do this stuff in a lighthearted way because it is really, who we are and what we create. But I think it's valuable to be able to have similar points of reference and things that we're studying, and I believe that we'll progress significantly with our own understanding practices by having more of these types of discussions. So if you're interested in more around this realm, there is a Telegram group specifically around the Selves, and you can see there's other guys here that want to have these discussions. So if personal development is a big focus for you and understanding like the mechanisms of psychology, then this is opening the door to go deeper. And I think we should do this again, maybe once a month or once a quarter to go further specific topics. You guys are welcome to propose a topic and be the leader, be the director of a different one. Doorbell's going off here, which means the children are up. I'm about to head to the ATG day 2. I'm going to upper body focus today. We're in Clearwater, so that's what's coming up next. But have an amazing rest of the day. I appreciate everyone that was on live, everyone that listens back, anyone that tuned in on the YouTube as well. And we'll continue the conversation. Speak again soon. Thanks, everyone.